practice. So I'm going to start by telling you a story, and you can listen to this story either by looking at the picture of the two wolves in front of you or with your eyes closed. An old Cherokee is teaching his grandson about life. A fight is going on inside me, he said to the boy. It is a terrible fight, and it is between two wolves. One is evil, his anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. He continued, the other is good. His joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside you and inside every other person too. The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, which wolf will win? The old Cherokee simply replied, the one you feed. Now, since hearing this story a few years ago, it has been one of my favorite stories, which relates to the idea of practice that I will share here. I have discussed in the last two clips the challenges and discomfort that show up in our lives, and that there are certain skills and mindsets that we can adopt through practice that allow us to experience and respond to challenges and discomfort with less struggle and lead lives of resilience, purpose, and compassion for ourselves and others. Now, the important keyword here is practice. The truth is, you get better at what you practice, and this is related to what happens in our brains. Now, what does our brain do? Well, it does many different things, but some of the things that our brain's capable of doing is that it creates our opinions, emotions, interpretations of experiences, personality, behavior, and habits. Now, some of these things like personality and behavior, we tend to think are fixed and do not change over our lifetime. But what we're finding out is that our brain is capable of change, and therefore these things are also capable of change. So that the brain that you're born with and the brain that you have now are actually different from each other. Not so much in the number of neurons that make up our brain, which are about 100 billion neurons, but it's actually different in the number and the types of connections that these neurons have made with each other. If you look at the clip on the left side, you will see these neurons extending out their antennas and reaching out to each other, making connections. Now, these connections are forged when we engage in different practices and also when we receive different stimuli. And the connections that the neurons make with each other are called synapses. If you look on the right, you can see the synapse density over time. Between newborn and 2 years, you can notice that the synaptic density increases immensely. This is because as a newborn, they're receiving a whole bunch of stimuli from the environment, and each stimulus is leading to a new synaptic connection. Now, between 2 years and adulthood, what do you notice? Actually, the total number of synapses decreases, and this is because we stop engaging in certain behaviors, and with that, the pathways are not used and they wean out. But you also notice that certain synaptic connections are stronger and thicker, and this is because we engage in certain practices repeatedly. And with thicker and stronger connections, we actually use less energy and effort to engage in them. So with practice, we get better at what we practice. Going back to the story of the two wolves, the important thing to notice is that both wolves live within us, and we cannot get rid of the first wolf. But by constantly reacting to challenges with anger, envy, or greed, and feeding that first wolf, these actions will make the first one stronger and stronger within us by forging stronger synaptic pathways. The skills we're trying to adopt are to move forward with resilience, purpose, and compassion, even when challenges show up. These skills develop with practice by feeding the second wolf. What you will notice is that feeding that first wolf is much easier because it's much easier to argue, blame, and complain when challenges show up. Feeding that second wolf is time-consuming. It requires effort and energy, and it's hard to see visible results instantaneously. But the more you feed that second wolf, the easier it gets. So you're practicing something all the time. Practice is about how you use your attention, time, and energy. So if you're constantly checking your phone and reacting to every beep and vibration that your phone makes, then you are practicing this and you're getting better at it. If you're constantly being distracted and is not paying attention to what's in front of you, then you are practicing this and you are getting better at it. If you're constantly looking around for those who are in need of help and are extending help to them, then you're practicing this and you're getting better at it. Now, when we talk about practice, we usually see it in a form of training, which is about setting aside time to practice. So if you have a piano recital coming up, then you might set aside 1 hour each day to practice, and this is training. Now, the form of practice that we tend to overlook is in a form of response. This is about how you respond to people, situations, and emotions, and it includes what you do and say and focus your attention on. So, for example, if you make a mistake and you beat yourself up for it, and you do this over and over and over again, this is practice and you get better at it. So basically, everything is practice. Now, when you see this number, what do you think this number represents? This is actually the number of possible pathways that our neurons can forge with each other in our brain. Now, to put this number in perspective, this is the total number of protons, electrons, and neutrons in the universe. This means that we have almost infinite number of possible paths that we can create in our brain. And the ones that we forge and make stronger are entirely our choice of how we practice and what we practice. You get better at what you practice, whether you're paying attention to it or not. So be careful of what you practice. Now, Bruce Lee said, "Under duress, we do not rise to our expectations, we fall to our level of training." This means that when we're facing challenges, even though we have every intention to respond to them positively and well, if we don't have that practice on a day-to-day basis, then we're going to falter for something less. So this is why, when we are trying to cultivate these skills to work with challenges, they can only be cultivated through practice. You will notice that each lesson comes with practice suggestions. This is something that I invite all of you to engage in, and only with consistent and intentional engagement, you will start to notice changes within yourself. Remember that feeding the second wolf is time-consuming. It requires effort and energy, and it's hard to see visible results instantaneously. But with practice, it gets easier. So, what are you practicing?